a fantasy princess in a bikini that barely exists, cute rabbits trapped in survival horror, and a rock and roll cartoon where a superstar needs the perfect voice to summon a demon. Today, we're looking at cult animated films that somehow passed for PG, or at least got treated much more gently than they probably deserved. I've left links in the description for some of the films you can watch online, but for now, let's get started. As in our previous videos about animated films, we can't get around Ralph Bakshi. Fire and Ice was released in 1983 as a collaboration between Bakshi and legendary fantasy artist Frank Frazetta. Compared to Bakshi's earlier work, it is one of the safer films he ever made, and somehow it even received a PG rating. I say somehow because this is still Bakshi. The story itself is pure sword and sorcery fantasy. An evil ruler named Necron and his mother, Queen Juliana, are slowly covering the world in ice, forcing humanity south. After his village is destroyed, a young warrior named Larn ends up caught in the middle of a war between Necron and the volcanic kingdom of Firekeep. At the same time, Princess Tigra is kidnapped by Necron's creatures, escapes, gets recaptured, escapes again, and spends most of the movie moving through deserts, forests, caves, monsters, and half the male cast. But the plot is not really the main attraction here. Fire and Ice is all about the way it looks. Frazetta had already helped define the look of sword and sorcery fantasy through his famous Conan book covers, along with his paintings for comics, fantasy paperbacks, posters, and album art. Here that same fantasy style becomes the whole visual language of the film. And of course, this is where the PG rating starts to feel almost unbelievable. Tigra spends almost the entire movie wearing a bikini so microscopic it barely seems worth having there at all. You do wonder whether the classifiers would have been so relaxed if Fire and Ice had been live action. Then again, a bikini like Tigra's might not even be physically possible on a real woman. But let's not overthink it too much, because Fire and Ice is still a fun fantasy adventure. For fans of Bakshi, Frazetta, or Conan-style fantasy, it is an easy film to recommend. You guessed it, we are not done with Bakshi yet. This time, we're going 6 years earlier. Wizards was released in 1977, and it later became one of Bakshi's big cult titles. The film takes place 2 million years after a nuclear war. Humanity has mostly destroyed itself. The survivors have mutated into monstrous creatures, and magical beings have returned to the Earth. At the center of the story are 2 magical brothers. Avatar uses magic to protect life. Black Wolf, his twin brother, goes in the opposite direction. He turns to technology, power, and propaganda, and that is where Wizards becomes much stranger than a normal fantasy adventure. The evil side of the film is built with clear Nazi imagery. At one point, Black Wolf discovers an old film projector and reels of Nazi propaganda footage. He uses them to inspire his mutant army, turning old images of fascist power into a weapon all over again. Bakshi himself described Wizards as an allegorical story about the creation of Israel after the Holocaust and about the danger of fascism rising again. The film did well in the theaters that showed it, earning around $9 million on a budget of about $2 million, and Bakshi later said that people pretty much loved it. But not all critics shared that feeling. One review dismissed Wizards as a dim animated novelty that was conspicuously lacking in narrative momentum. Another called it only a mildly interesting mixture of clashing polemics and shoot-'em-up melodrama, and said it merely repeated the obvious dangers of nuclear war and man's inhumanity to man. But critics are critics. You know how it goes. Cute and cuddly bunnies. Sounds lovely. But if you saw Watership Down as a child, you may not agree. Released in 1978, Watership Down is an adaptation of Richard Adams' novel, and it has a long reputation as one of the most frightening animated films ever treated as suitable for children. The story follows a group of English rabbits who leave their home and set out to find a safer home somewhere else. In many ways, it plays like a survival film. The rabbits are small animals in a world full of danger, and the movie never pretends that all of them are safe. Some will make it, some will not. The British Board of Film Classification gave Watership Down a universal rating when it was released in cinemas. Their reasoning was that, while the film might move children emotionally, it would not seriously trouble them once the spell of the story was broken. Well, I admire the optimism. Then again, we all had to start our horror education somewhere. If you're fond of post-apocalyptic movies and classic animation, Rock and Rule should probably be on your list. The film is set far in the future, on a war-torn Earth where humans are gone, and evolved rats, cats, and dogs have taken their place. Somehow this new civilization still looks completely trapped in the 80s, which is not a complaint. The story follows a young band trying to break through. Then Mock enters the picture, a super rocker who looks a lot like Mick Jagger and is searching for the perfect voice. Not for a normal concert, of course. He needs it to summon a demon. It began as a children's film called Drats, but the tone shifted as the project evolved. Somehow, the finished film still received a PG rating, despite Club 666, a little nudity, and some very strange creature imagery. Visually, it looks like a Disney musical got dragged into the world of heavy metal with a bit of that dirty Bakshi fantasy energy on the side. And the soundtrack gives the whole thing even more cult value, with names like Iggy Pop and Debbie Harry from Blondie. Fantastic Planet looked strange when it came out, and it still does. Even now, there are not many films that feel quite like it. This French-language animated film takes place on the planet Igam, a place that feels mystical, but also quietly nightmarish. Humans, called Oms, have been taken from Earth and now live under the control of the Drags, enormous blue beings with technology far beyond anything humans can match. The main character is a young Om named Ter. After escaping from his Drag owner, he joins a radical tribe of Oms and becomes part of their resistance against Drag oppression. So yes, this is science fiction animation, but it is very far from a safe little cartoon adventure. And since we are already talking about René Laloux, we might as well stay with him for one more film. The Time Masters is not as well known, but it still deserves attention. On the surface, it is about a young boy stranded on a desert planet. But if Fantastic Planet teaches you anything, it is not to trust the surface too much. Once the basic conflict is in place, Laloux and his co-writers keep opening the story up, revealing stranger and more complicated layers underneath. I do not want to spoil where the film goes, because part of the pleasure is watching it slowly become something more bizarre than it first appears. But The Time Masters is not just weird for the sake of being weird. It has inventive storytelling, beautiful animation, and the kind of world building that asks you to trust the film even when you are not completely sure where it is taking you. And if you're willing to follow it, it does reward you. Have you ever heard of animation from North Korea? Probably not the first country you think of, but there was SEK Studio, also known as the April 26th Animation Studio. Foreign companies sent work there for a simple reason. Feature animation was expensive, and North Korea had skilled animators working for much lower costs. So SEK ended up taking on a number of international projects, and Gandahar was one of them. The film is based on Jean-Pierre Andrevon's novel, The Machine Men vs. Gandahar, and it was originally made in French. In the US, Miramax released the film as Light Years, with Isaac Asimov involved in the adaptation. The film mixes science fiction and fantasy, and the story begins in the peaceful land of Gandahar. Then everything changes when an army of robots called the Men of Metal attacks. The people of Gandahar are turned to stone and taken away, so the Council of Women sends a young man named Sylvain to investigate. He discovers that the Men of Metal have been sent from the future by a giant brain called Metamorphosis. The strange part is that Metamorphosis says he is innocent in the present, but in 1,000 years, he will become the evil force destroying Gandahar. so Sylvain agrees to go into stasis for 1,000 years. And when he wakes up, the film somehow gets even weirder. Although some elements of this movie may seem cliché and even cheesy, it works in the film's favor. If the recent rat news has not been enough for you, I brought the Pied Piper. This Czechoslovak stop-motion film from 1986 is based on the famous Pied Piper of Hamelin legend, rooted in medieval Germany. In that story, a mysterious piper leads the rats out of town, and when the people refuse to pay him, he takes their children instead. The movie keeps the basic shape of the legend, but turns it into something much harsher. Here, Hamelin is not just a town with a rat problem. It is a place rotting from greed and gluttony. The rats almost become a reflection of the people themselves. Most of the townsfolk are ugly wooden puppets living in warped houses, speaking through grunts and mumbles instead of normal language. The film is not completely without light, but even its hope feels fragile. There is an innocent young woman, a silent fisherman, and a newborn child with an uncertain future. Around them, though, the town already feels twisted beyond saving. Visually, the Pied Piper pulls from Cubism and German Expressionist cinema. Everything feels like a nightmare, and the sound only makes it more unsettling. I was basically ready to finish this video, and then at the last minute, I came across Felidae, which I somehow had never seen before. It is a German animated film rated 12 and up in Germany. In the US, you may see it listed as unrated, though it is hard to imagine it getting anything softer than an R. So forgive me, because this one does not quite fit the title, but I really want more people to know it exists. Cat lovers, though, may not thank me for this one. Felidae follows Francis, a smart and cynical house cat who moves into a new neighborhood with his owner. Almost immediately, he finds the body of another cat, killed in a way that makes it clear this is not just some ordinary animal attack. Francis starts investigating with help from Bluebeard, a rough, one-eyed cat who knows the area better than he does. The case quickly gets uglier. More bodies appear, Francis begins having disturbing nightmares, and the trail leads him toward a strange cat cult connected to something called Claudandus. So yes, this is basically a murder mystery with cats. Anyone who hears animated cat movie and thinks of the Aristocats is in for a very rude correction. As with the other films on this list, I left a link in the description if you want to watch it online. Highly recommended.